I'm happy to present International Coalition Against the Ratification of Ideological Istanbul Convention by the European Union. The coalition, which stands for family, marriage, and state sovereignty. A coalition that stands against attempts to ideologize international law. We are joined by experts, medical professionals, lawyers, civil society leaders from 11 countries of the European Union: Hungary, Croatia, Slovakia, Spain, the Netherlands, Bulgaria, France, Italy are together with us today. But leaders of organizations from Romania and Belgium are also going to promote our joint initiative in their countries. We highly encourage you to sign the petition under stopgenderconvention.org. I kindly ask Karolina Pawłowska, Director of International Law Center of Ordo Iuris Institute, to start with a brief introduction to the topic.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to start with some short introductory remarks, after which I will pass voice to our partners, which will share with us their own national experiences and perspective on the Istanbul Convention. Despite the fact that in 2017 the European Union signed the Istanbul Convention, the document has not been yet ratified. But the pressure to do so is getting stronger and stronger, as the ratification of the Istanbul Convention is presented as one of the top priorities by the European Commission. These postulates are present in many most important documents recently issued by the European Commission, for example, in the gender equality strategy for next 5 years, and action plan for human rights and democracy for next 4 years. All of that is happening despite the fact that there is a growing opposition of many European countries toward this convention and concepts that it was built upon. Even in countries that ratified it, like in Poland, it is more and more common to say about withdrawal from this dangerous document. The Eurocrats not only ignored these voices, but are attempting to marginalize them in many ways. For example, just recently, the European Parliament asked Court of Justice of European Union about possibility to ratify the convention by qualified majority voting. That means without the consent of all member states. It should be stressed that all of these actions have no any grounds in European Union treaty binding law. Even the European Convention on Human Rights, which is a document that does not raise any substantial doubts, was not ratified by the European Union, as it has no competences to do so. But one could ask, what is it all about? Why so many countries, so many citizens, so many organizations opposed to this convention? After all, it is said that the main reason of this convention is to combat violence against women. I believe that everyone agrees that combating violence against women, against children, against men, against any vulnerable group of persons is a priority for each one of us and should be done on every level of social structure, beginning with local communities, through state, ending at the international institution. But those who believe that this particular convention was meant to combat violence against women and domestic violence were just deceived. In the numerous articles of this convention, there is nothing about real causes of violence. There are any propositions to address problems of alcoholism, sexualization of women, and fighting with erosion of family bonds. There is nothing about state support to the family, which is, if it functions properly, the safest environment for everyone. Instead of that, the Istanbul Convention was based on very radical and ideological concept of gender. As it states in its preamble, quotation, violence against women is a manifestation of historically unequal power relations between women and men, which have led to domination over and discrimination against women by men, and to the prevention of the full advancement of women. Gender itself is described in the Convention as socially constructed roles, behaviors, activities that a given society considers appropriate for women and men. The idea of gender has therefore its origins in constructionalism and Marxism. First of all, it defines femininity and masculinity as a social construct, ignoring their biological dimension. Secondly, it uses dialectical concepts, particularly visible in Marxism, but the difference lies in the shift of the center of gravity from class struggle to the eternal struggle between sexes, which can only be ended by elimination of sex differences. The ideological character of this term was confirmed in recent letter that our organization, Ordo Iuris Institute, received from European Equal Rights Commissioner Helena Dalli. As you can read, she confirms that the term gender has nothing to do with classical and based on natural conditions distinction between women and men. What's more, according to the research conducted broadly in whole European Union by Fundamental Rights Agency, which is, to say the least, not perceived as an institution favorable towards organizations supporting family, in those countries where the gender perspective was adopted, the violence against women have not decreased and remain high. So we can say that the correlation is just the opposite. The real aim of this convention is not to combat violence against women. This document is a vehicle of wide-ranging social engineering which leads to arbitrary interference in most basic and natural social structures. Through the assumption of dialectic gender war, it undermines natural and complementary roles of women and men and antagonizes them. Through the introduction of education about so-called non-stereotypical gender roles, it leads to undermining the fundamental role of parents in raising up their children. Through the assumption of the structural character of the violence, it aims to undermine whole organic social structure, which is based on family and difference between women and men. But as I stated before, it is the family that is the best environment that protects against violence and pathology. It is the family that states should support and offer help in difficult situations. Ladies and gentlemen, we have gathered here as a coalition of NGOs protecting family, protecting women and men from whole Europe to speak loudly against plans of ratification the Istanbul Convention by the European Union. This document uses the postulate of combating violence against women as an excuse to impose very dangerous ideology. We can impact our everyday life of each one of us. We believe that the growing opposition toward these plans expressed by more and more European member states should be supported by strong and loud voice of NGOs and citizens from whole Europe. This is why we would like to announce the start of the big international online petition against these plans of European Union. We will not remain silent, and Eurocrats can no longer ignore our voice. As Dr. Tymoteusz Zich stated, we have launched a website on which each one of you can sign the petition. It was translated to more than 16 languages already, and we are still open for different organizations from different countries from whole Europe to join our initiative. Thank you so much, and now I would like to pass voice to our partners.
Due to the coronavirus outbreak, we don't meet here in Warsaw in person. Therefore, we'll connect with our partner organizations via video call. We'll start with Dr. Željka Markic from Croatia, who is Executive Director of Croatian NGO and the name of the family, which is advocating for human rights and family rights. She coordinated organization of demonstrations against ratification of Istanbul Convention by Croatia in 2018, which assembled tens of thousands of people. Dr. Željka, the floor is yours.
Dr. Željka, can you hear us? Okay, I think that we have a little problems with connections, so maybe we will skip to our another partner.
We'll get back to Croatia later. And now we can start with organizations from Slovakia. That is Patrik Daniška from Inštitút pre ľudské práva a rodinnú politiku, president of Human Rights and Family Policy Institute in English, attorney and spokesperson of the National March for Life, which gathers more than 50,000 people in Bratislava and different parts of Slovakia, who is joined by Andrej Ralbovský, who works for Slovakia Christiana Foundation, also a lawyer who received his master's degree from the Pan-European University.
Thank you very much. We consider Istanbul Convention as an attempt to misuse the problem of domestic violence to promote a narrow ideological agenda of certain lobby groups spreading neo-Marxism and radical feminism. Slovakia's position on this matter was clearly demonstrated at the national level when the political representation repeatedly and by a clear majority resolutely rejected this document. Public opinion in Slovakia is also very strongly opposed to joining this controversial and highly ideological legal document. It is obvious that the primary ambition of the convention is not so much to solve the problem of violence against women, but to promote the ideological basis of radical feminism and especially gender ideology, which has no basis in biology or other natural sciences. 6 years ago, more than 300 Slovak doctors, psychologists, sociologists, and other experts pointed out the dangers of the infiltration of gender ideology into the educational process through the so-called gender sensitization of children. We perceive a great danger that if the Istanbul Convention was ratified at the EU level, the pressure would increase on the member states to apply a gender approach, not only to tackling domestic violence, but also in other areas. There would be unjust interference in the autonomy of the family, as well as attempts to change the culture of society in an effort to eradicate gender stereotypes, so-called gender stereotypes, which would also affect all seemingly unrelated areas. Therefore, Slovakia Christiana Foundation, as one of the co-organizers of this petition in Slovakia, urges all those who care about the health future of Slovakia and Europe to support it as soon as possible and to show the European Commission that we in Slovakia do not want the Istanbul Convention or similar ideological experiments. At the same time, we thank all those who have already supported this petition.
Let me add some remarks also. Well, Slovakia has decided not to ratify Istanbul Convention. There were several resolutions of European Parliament on this topic. First one, more than 1 year ago, was saying that Slovakia should not become a member to Istanbul Convention. And later on, there was another resolution of Slovak Parliament saying that our parliament disagreed that Slovakia would be bound by Istanbul Convention through acts and decisions of European Union as well. Why is there this opposition? The arguments behind this position of Slovakia are the same as were already presented by Mrs. Pavlovska. I would like to point out to one specific argument, which is a problematic definition of term gender. There is a definition of this term in international law, which binds also Slovakia. It is Rome Statute on International Criminal Court. Definition in this treaty says that gender refers to two sexes, male and female, within the context of society. This definition is very good and acceptable for international community because there is a clear link between sex, biology, and gender. And in fact, our identity as men and women are strongly rooted in our biology, in sex. So the connection between sex and gender need to be preserved in any definition of gender. Istanbul Convention took different paths. They decided to define gender as social construct. That our differences, the differences between men and women, are socially constructed. That there is nothing natural between differences, and we know that it's not true. There are biological differences as well as other differences between men and women, and the whole life we are discovering these differences, and we are cherished by these differences. They are beneficial to us that we are different, and therefore this definition is very problematic, and Slovakia decided based on this problem and other problems which are in this document not to ratify. So what I want to stress now on this international platform is that there is no international consensus on definition of term gender as it is specified in Istanbul Convention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your input, for sharing with us your experiences and elaborating in more detailed way the problem with the term gender. Now I would like to ask Dr. Żelka, have you resolved your problems with connection? Thank you very much. So I will pass voice to Dr. Żelka Markic. Thank you.
Yes. I would like to thank you for organizing this international platform, because I think it is very important that we continue showing to the public the importance of rejection of gender ideology. Firstly, I would like to say that the gender ideology has used the weakest and most vulnerable members of all European countries in order to impose ideology, gender ideology. I find this unacceptable as a woman, that violence against children and violence against women is used to impose something that those who want to impose it didn't dare to put on public debate. In Croatia, we have seen on smaller scale, on a national scale, what is happening now on the level of the Europe. Our government has imposed ratification of Istanbul Convention, although it was very clear that the general public is against it. We have organized demonstrations in the capital, Zagreb, and in the second largest city in Croatia, Split. There was a very big public debate, and it was clear that nobody is against protection of women and children, of course, but that we are against imposing of gender ideology on all of us. In spite of strong public resistance to this, our Prime Minister and the ruling party, which declares themselves as a Demo-Christian party, has ratified convention. What I can confirm that in the last 2 years, we didn't see any improvement in protection of women and children. We just know that more money will go to the organization which promote gender ideology and abortion and the feminism that does not try to make stronger all women. And what we know is that it will continue to work in this way. I would like to thank organizers of this joint action, and we will continue to insist on European Union which respects sovereignty of all member countries. It is unacceptable that gender ideology is imposed to all of us, to all 28 countries which have all nothing against protection of women in the best possible way, but we do not agree to impose of us artificially created terms which have completely different agenda different from protection of women and children. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Željka. Thank you for your experiences, with sharing with us your experiences. And I think that you've mentioned, the thing that you've mentioned about how the gender convention is using women to impose this ideology shows that this document is just intended to impose on everyone, on each country, ideology. Thank you so much again for your statement. Now I would like to introduce Mrs. Dr. Eszter Parkanyi from Center for Fundamental Rights from Hungary. She is a lawyer with a focus on the fundamental rights, European law, and protection of life. Dr. Parkanyi works for the Center for Fundamental Rights, which is a Budapest-based conservative and Christian-minded research institute dealing with legal analysis since 2013. And I would like to introduce Mr. Miklos Pani, also from Center for Fundamental Rights. He is a deputy director responsible for international affairs for the Center for Fundamental Rights, and his primary research fields are the operation of the European Union and regional politics. Thank you so much for joining us, and I would like to pass the voice to you.
Thank you, Carolina, for giving us the floor. We are grateful to be here today as part of this really important initiative. In Hungary, the Center for Fundamental Rights was the first to draw public attention and raise awareness regarding the dangers of the Istanbul Convention back in 2017. We feel it is our duty as a conservative, Christian-minded think tank to shed some light on the fact that this document would not serve as an effective tool in the fight against violence. Rather, it would be an act of creeping legislation to entrap member states to use gender as a legal term in their legislative frameworks. The stated aim of the convention is to protect women against violence, but the underlying objective is to promote gender ideology and to undermine the traditional family. The Istanbul Convention compels us to legally accept that gender is a social construct, that it has nothing to do with biological sex, and also to teach this to our children, who can be easily influenced and therefore confused due to their young age. Not to mention that this could all lead to a future where, for example, religious beliefs that reject gender ideology could be viewed as discriminatory. We must not let the European Union be a part of this social experiment. The Hungarian government has signed the Istanbul Convention in 2014, but after fully understanding its underlying agenda, it does not want to ratify it. Hungary will not elevate the concept of gender and the Convention's gender ideology into her legal system. In addition, some of its provisions are contrary to Hungary's migration policy. But since the protection and help of victims is important for the government, they have designed a package of measures that are consistently drafting laws under their policy of zero tolerance for domestic violence and violence against women. On the 6th of May 2020, the Hungarian parliament has adopted a political declaration on rejecting the Istanbul Convention. It calls on the government not to go any further in acceding to the convention and to lobby the European Union to do the same. The declaration says that the Council of Europe document takes an unacceptable approach to defining gender and that Parliament should not incorporate this approach into national law. In addition, the Convention's gender-based asylum rules are not consistent with Hungary's legal environment, which seeks to take effective action against illegal migration. The valuable parts of the Convention, when it comes to protecting children and taking action to counter violence against women, are properly embedded in Hungary's legal system. These are the main reasons that reinforce our conviction that the Convention should not be ratified and have led to our decision to support this petition. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you for your account, Esther. I think it's so important for us in whole Central Europe that there are countries which legislative bodies openly disagree with the positions of the European Union regarding the Istanbul Convention and openly express opposition to this attempt to ideologize international law. Now I will pass the voice to Dr. Viktor Kostov from Bulgaria, who is a lawyer. He has a PhD in law with international experience. So he's a researcher in the field of fundamental rights and intercultural disciplines. Dr. Kostov represents clients before countries' Supreme Courts and the European Court of Human Rights. Dr. Kostov, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank you as organizers of this significant event, and I think it's very timely because, as you pointed out, we see a form of ideologizing and a push that we have felt all throughout Europe, and especially Eastern Europe. We know we Eastern Europeans are very sensitive toward any ideology that is being put on us and meant to unify the people under one sort of thinking. And it's amazing. I will not repeat the flaws of the convention, as they're so unanimously, the opinions that we heard so far are almost exactly the same. I will just run briefly through the history of the Bulgarian rejection of the European Convention and make some side remarks. I need to point out that I represent two organizations in this case, Freedom for All, which has fought for freedom of religion, conscience, and speech, and traditional family values since 2004, and Parents United for Children, which since last year had to additionally put pressure on the family by adopting the social services law, which is an absolute offshoot of the thinking which undergirds the Istanbul Convention. The Istanbul Convention was signed by Bulgaria initially, but in 2018 it was brought by the parliament in order to be discussed and ratified. However, parental organizations, human rights organizations, us including, were involved in unearthing, revealing the document's true intentions, which is so nicely concealed under the benevolent language of protection against violence against women and children. As a result, there was a public debate which followed, including organizations, religious organizations, human rights organizations, political got involved, including Bulgarian Orthodox Church. And it was very clear that this document does not carry the weight of a true, real international legal document. That it was ideologically, harshly, in a very way, it was bringing an end to fundamental categories of human life, of national histories, of Christian and cultural to in a way that was meant to change society. We have harshly criticized the convention because it does have neo-Marxist overtones. For example, it poses men against women, and as the two opposing classes, where men is the oppressor and women are the suffering class that needs to recognize the way we think about men and women and introduce the social gender, which eventually in neo-Marxism is meant to deconstruct the traditional family goal. Also, the European Convention seeks to introduce these concepts, as I mentioned, by redefining natural categories in a way that is radical, and actually it's condescending on the people. That I think they were hoping that nobody will understand what they're aiming at. Also, it uses ridiculous concepts of any lawmaking and jurisprudence by introducing terms fitting for Freudian psychology into a document which is supposed to be legal and international, part of international law. One example is the idea that feelings define the idea of gender, of sex, the idea of psychological violence. We all know that the government cannot punish for violence that is in the psyche, in the soul. There's a lot of problems in terms of the legal concepts that they introduce. Also, we have simply called this document inadequate, radical, and in social engineering. As a result of the debate and its harsh criticism, members of the Bulgarian parliament introduced our situation was a little bit different. We see the previous examples that parliaments were the ones who refused to ratify the convention, but the Bulgarian parliament did not go straight to that step. They filed a case with the Bulgarian Constitutional Court, which had to decide on the case and had to decide if this Istanbul Convention fits with the Bulgarian constitution or it contradicts it. They found, the Constitutional Court did their legal analysis. I will not go into detail right now, but they found that the European Convention does go against the Bulgarian constitution. Not a big surprise there. And that was, we thought it was a great victory of the people and of reasonable legal thinking, reasonable cultural identity, and a sovereign decision of a nation and its jurisprudence. Well, here is the remark that I want to make that is in addition to the previous speakers, and we thought it was a closed case, but it wasn't. Actually, what we saw and what we heard from the European Union, from the United Nations, is European commissioners visiting the country and representatives of the United Nations coming and actually saying that, oh no, you didn't understand the convention. Oh, you have to revisit it. You must accept it, actually, said one European commissioner who was visiting back recently in March. I found this to be condescending, to be in total violation and disrespectful, undiplomatic, and disrespectful of the sovereign decision of the Bulgarian Constitutional Court. I mean, you cannot visit these countries. The EU cannot claim we are for the rule of law and come and tell us, actually, you're pretty stupid. You don't understand what you didn't sign, so might as well sign it. Well, I want to point that, and I think that even though it was mentioned that there will be pressure on the peoples and on the governments who this ridiculous convention, I think the people know better, and I think the people know that their families and their freedom actually depends on that. So I totally we actually, because I don't speak on my behalf of on behalf of the organizations that I represent, we welcome this international coalition for the defense of the family, because we believe that this is a defense of freedom, of democracy, and of the sovereignty of the peoples who comprise the European Union.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your speech. It was very encouraging to hear how your tribunal, constitutional tribunal, decided that the convention is not in line with your legal provisions, with your legal system. And I think that your point about that the convention is a threat to our freedom, to the democracy, is very important to speak about it loudly. Thank you again so much. Now I would like to ask Dr. Leontien Bakermans about her experiences from her point of view, as she is a representative of a non-governmental organization, the founder of One of Us, Netherlands, for Science, Culture and Life. So from the country that in many ways adopted this danger ideological language that is used by the convention. Dr. Bakermans, please tell us about the consequences that you can see on your experiences, national experiences of using this radical ideology, radical terms.
Yeah, thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for taking this initiative. I would like to focus on the imposition of the gender ideology. In the Netherlands, it is very simple to go to the city hall with a medical declaration in order to change your sex in the opposite one, without any surgical procedure. And in the near future, not even a medical declaration
Excuse me, I think we have a connection problem. The connection is disturbed. Therefore, we should get back to Dr. Bakermans in a minute. And now I will ask Mr. Alessandro Fiore from Pro Vita and Familia organization and coming from Italy. He has a degree in law and has done extensive studies in philosophy, theology, and bioethics. He has been heard various times by Italian parliamentary committees on issues concerning family, civil unions, and so-called gender perspectives in education. He took part in both national and international conferences, in particular relating to the subject of gender ideology. Mr. Fiore, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. I wholeheartedly thank the organizers for this initiative and this opportunity. And we, pro-family and pro-life organizations in Italy, are very happy to see that many countries, especially in Eastern Europe, are very aware of the negative implications of gender ideology in international documents, like in the Istanbul Convention. I think that the history of the application of the Istanbul Convention in Italy shows what kind of consequences there can be. Now, Italy signed the convention in 2012 and ratified it in 2013. But even the Italian government, when it signed the Istanbul Convention, was aware of the fact that the term gender in the convention was problematic in itself, as it implied a new perspective, that of gender. So Italy filed a verbal note to the Council of Europe declaring that it would apply the convention in accordance with constitutional principles and provisions. And if one seeks to know the reasons of this verbal note, we find in the Senate discussions that the statement was motivated by the fact that the definition of gender contained in the convention was considered too broad and uncertain and presented critical profiles with the Italian constitutional system. Now, unfortunately, this statement by the government was practically forgotten subsequently. And so all the provisions that were made afterwards on the basis of the Istanbul Convention had no reference to the critical implications, the gender perspective. Actually, they were celebrating this new perspective. For example, obviously, there have been also provisions that have gone in the direction of preventing violence against women. But we have had, for example, in May 2015, an extraordinary action plan against sexual and gender-based violence was approved in Italy. And this plan is focused also on the education problem, on the education sector. And it says that following the ratification of the Istanbul Convention, we have to introduce this gender perspective also in schools, in educational and teaching practice. And this national plan says explicitly that the priority objective must be to educate for equality and respect for differences. So that might seem quite good, but it says that in particular to overcome stereotypes concerning the social role, representation and meaning of being women and men, respecting the gender identity and sexual orientation through the inclusion of a gender approach in educational and teaching practice. And it even says that in the context of the national guidelines for the curriculum of school and even of kindergarten, so we are talking about very, very small children, the government will therefore draw a policy document that calls on these institutions, so even kindergarten, to deepen and to deepen and tackle the issues related to gender identity and the prevention of gender discrimination. So really, we have seen that the Istanbul Convention has even had consequences in the educational system in Italy. And, you know, it's a perspective that is full of holes. I mean, many of the experts today have already said much about this, but you know, even on the definition of women and man, it can be logically demonstrated that in a gender perspective, especially if it is a trans-inclusive perspective that refers to non-discrimination on basis of gender identity, there is no coherent way to define the term women, for example, so we don't even know what we're talking about in the context of the convention.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your statement. I would like also to add that Poland is, as well as Italy, a country that also ratified the convention and made a declaration that all of the provisions of the convention should be interpreted in a scope of our constitutional law. And what's more, fortunately, we can hear more and more declarations from Polish officials that there will be attempts to withdraw from this document in the future. Now I would like to ask Dr. Leontien Bakkermans, could you try again to connect with us?
No, we didn't manage to establish the connection, so
okay. Okay, so now we will pass to Mrs. Ali Lejar. She is since 2015 the delegate to the European Parliament for the French NGO Femina Europa, and she is married and mother of a daughter engineer graduated from French University École Centrale de Paris and had a career with senior positions in a car and truck company in France and abroad. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to participate to this event in order to oppose the imposition by the EU Commission of the Istanbul Convention to the people. Yes, we have concerns with this Istanbul Convention because it codifies a controversial definition of gender as a social construct, independent of the biological reality, because it aims to eradicate any tradition based on stereotyped gender roles, because also it infringes the role of the parents, the right of the parents to educate their children according to their moral and religious convictions, and also because it calls for the establishment of a far-reaching monitoring mechanism called Grevio, and we fear it could erode the national sovereignty of the people. France has ratified the Istanbul Convention in 2014, and we see the impact of this ratification in our educational, social policies and national laws. An example, in 2013, the High Council for Equality between Men and Women was created in France. Its goal is to make recommendations to strengthen gender equality, to prevent gender violence. In order to carry this policy, which also with the Istanbul Convention, which was signed, this High Council for Equality declares we have to eliminate gender stereotypes and deconstruct social roles. So all our teaching materials and school curricula have been modified according to that ideology. But we see in France that the violence against women didn't decrease at all, it's the contrary. And Femina Europa with other NGOs, French NGOs, denounce this ideological policy by informing the parents about what is told to their children at school. And so we agreed to join the petition Stop Gender, Stand for Family, because we must remember that in May 2017, the Council decided that the EU should accede to the Istanbul Convention, but only within the limits of the EU competence, which is asylum, non-refoulement, and judicial cooperation in criminal matters. We must remind that all that regards education, church autonomy, parents and children relationship fall within member states' national competences. The plans of the European Commission to go towards an extensive accession to the Istanbul Convention would oblige all the member states to introduce a definition of gender as a social construction, to mainstream it in their educational or social systems. It is unlawful because this action would be taken without any grounds in international binding treaties. Femina Europa notes that the EU Commission ignores the voice of many European countries and its citizens by pushing this convention against their will, if we want to restore confidence in the EU institutions, it is the worst way to proceed. Femina Europa supports the petition in order to send to the EU commissioners a clear signal that introducing such ideology, which undermine natural family and marriage under the guise of combating violence against women, is completely unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your statement. I think that the convention, the attempts to ratify the convention by the European Union are just an example, of course, most drastic example of a large scope of actions that the European Union is taking now to exceed its competences without grounds in international law. Now I would like to come back to Dr. Leontina Bakermans. I think that we've resolved our problems with connections. So please, the floor is yours. Could you turn on your microphone, please? Okay. Just wait a second. We will try to fix it from our side. Okay. We will now skip to our another partner. I would like to ask Mr. Ángel Manuel García Carmona from Centro Jurídico Tomás Moro from Spain about his statement. Thank you. Oh. You have to turn on your microphone, please.
Unmute your microphone.
Thanks.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for the invitation. Nice to be representing my entity as in supporting that initiative. Our reasons for that are related to a concern on European Union advancement on a specific ideological agenda. It's something aligned to its centralist and Soviet-leaning process. Gender ideology is such a strategy that tries to erode Christian anthropology with the aim of contributing to the destruction of family by a struggle of sexes. They talk about genders, but that's a sex struggle. They try to deny the roles that per nature are proper of men and women. Both may complement, although it's not the aim of those social engineers. To achieve all this, they need to establish such an official truth. Official truth is not the same that truth be act against truth and nature. They have to coerce and impose laws that attack free speech, the freedom of Christians, apart from reversing the charge of the proof. They want that administrations demonize the white Christian and heterosexual prototype of men. Moreover, in Spain, there have been some advances when it comes to those totalitarian projects. Gender violence law, gay marriage, increasing of budgetary assignments for specific NGOs and public institutions, LGBT regional laws, and some and diverse ways of institutional propaganda. It's too easy to impose those contents at schools, even in some private ones, especially if they receive some government funding. That's what in Spain is called educación concertada.
It's extremely hard to hear you. And right now, maybe we can move on to the next speaker, since there's some kind of problem with the microphone. Maybe Mrs. Leontion is already back with us. Maybe we can fix this problem with the microphone. But we don't hear you, Uncle. We don't hear you. Okay, so maybe we should just go on to the next speaker. Mrs. Leontion is with us, or if not, I would ask Deputy Director of International Law Center of Ordo Iuris Magdalena Oleg to share her account of potential dangers regarding the future cause of events in the European Union. Magda, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the main goal of the European Commission as a part of the fight against gender-based violence is to conclude an agreement on the accession of the European Union to the Istanbul Convention. However, the Commission has also prepared a contingency plan in the event that member states do not agree on the EU accession to the Istanbul Convention. In the new strategy for gender equality, the Commission proposed an initiative to extend the areas of crime where harmonization is possible with specific forms of gender-based violence, so to adopt the so-called Eurocrimes. Ladies and gentlemen, Article 83, Paragraph 1 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the EU actually provides for the possibility of harmonizing substantive criminal law by way of a directive, but only if the cumulative four conditions are met. Firstly, minimum standards defining definitions of offenses and criminal sanctions may be laid out in the areas of particularly serious crime. Secondly, this particularly serious crime must have a cross-border dimension. Thirdly, when extending the catalogue of areas of crime in which harmonization can be carried out, a link with the areas already listed in the second paragraph of the above-mentioned article must be indicated. Fourthly, the discussed catalogue of Eurocrimes may be extended provided that the criterion of crime development after the Lisbon Treaty is met. Our analysis, recently presented on our website, showed that the forms of gender-based violence described by the Commission, quite laconic and vague, do not meet the above-mentioned premises. Therefore, there is no legal basis to introduce the so-called Eurocrimes. It must be pointed out again that the member states did not accept the gender ideology. Nevertheless, the Commission will pursue to impose this concept of gender-based violence, even if accession to the Istanbul Convention fails. Thank you. I will ask my colleague.
Thank you so much. think I don't know if the connection with Mrs. Leontion was finally established, or we are going to connect via phone. Yes. So if it is technically possible, let's share your account via phone simply. Oh, so just in a most simple technical way in terms of tech. Yes. So. Yes.
Okay.
Dr. Leontion?
Yes, can I go ahead?
Yes.
Yes, okay. I hope that at least it is, you can hear it now then. So I would like to focus on the imposition of the gender ideology. And in the Netherlands, it's very simple to go to the city hall with a medical declaration in order to change your sex in the opposite one without any surgical procedure. And in the near future, not even a medical declaration will be necessary to change your sex. This is the so-called self-ID law. And so once a trans woman has the same rights as a biological woman. So this is not preventing violence against women, on the contrary. For instance, places as women's toilets and changing rooms are not only for women anymore. Trans women with a penis are using these facilities as well. And this is also acknowledged by the EU group of experts in a recent report on implementation by the Netherlands of the Istanbul Convention. The Dutch National Action Plan, Violence Does Not Belong Anywhere, sets out a view of domestic violence that is gender neutral, with no recognition for women as a group at particular risk from gender-based harm. So the declaration wants to prevent and combat violence against women, but they are just introducing opportunities for violence. Laws have to be based on science, not on feelings. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your brief but substantial account. And I'm happy to close the today's conference. I will ask Karolina Pawłowska to share a few final remarks on my side. I would like to say thank you to all the participants from abroad. I would like to thank you for all your accounts of the situation in particular countries all over Europe. We see that in different countries we are currently on different stages of either implementation of the convention or debate regarding its ratification. But still we share the common view that laws, that international law should be based on reason, should be based on reality instead of the ideology. We share the common conviction that European Union and Europe as a whole has no future without family and marriage. So we cannot leave family and marriage out of the picture. We have to put them back right in the very center. We stand together against the attempt to ideologize international law, to ratify the Istanbul Convention by the European Union, and we all highly encourage you to sign the petition under stopgenderconvention.org. Karolina?
I would like just to add in a few words that I think that all that you have stated during our press conference, all these experiences from different countries are very encouraging, because we can see that many citizens, many organizations still oppose to this radical concept and can speak loudly and organize themselves to speak loudly about the danger implications it has to the family and to our social order. Our initiative is open for everyone that is dedicated to do the same, to promote the petition, to promote our materials on the Istanbul Convention. So please Feel free to share it with your friends, with your family, with your colleagues, and through the social media. We have to be loud. We have to say about our opposition to this convention very loudly and firmly. And I hope that our initiative will not only block the ratification of the Istanbul by the European Union, but also will help hold this institution to restore its original goals, because the European Union is not the institution that it's acting for itself. It was created to help member states. Thank you very much, and again, please visit our website, stopgenderconvention.org. Thank you so much.
One more thing, if there are any questions to the panelists, to our international guests, please feel free to ask them. I don't know if there are any questions asked via YouTube or otherwise online.
Pytanie od tygodnika Solidarność. Po co Unia Europejska chce przyjmować genderową konwencję stambulską, skoro robią to już będące jej członkami państwa narodowe?
I will translate the question. It comes from Tygodnik Solidarność, a Polish weekly, asking us whether the European Union is the European Union willing to ratify the Istanbul Convention, where it has been already ratified by so many member states. What's actually the reason? Maybe we should ask our international guests to answer.
May I say so?
Yes, please.
I think the aim is imposition of gender ideology on the level of the whole Union.
Is it the full answer or just just a comment? Thank you.
I don't know, are we supposed to participate in answering, but I would like to say that out of 28 member countries of European Union, there is not one country that would not agree with the protection of women and children against violence. That this we are opposing, and some countries are still opposing on a national level, to the fact that gender ideology is imposed through the convention, which aims to protect women and children. If the aim is protection of women and children, then we would, without gender ideology, we would sign, all countries would sign this convention without any problems. The fact that the European Commission continues to insist on the elements of this convention, which we do not agree with, is a proof that behind this convention there is an attempt to impose ideology, and it has nothing to do with protection of women and children. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your answer. Is there anyone else willing to answer this general question? I have the other question, which is quite close in its scope to the first one. It comes from Gość Niedzielny, I think the largest Polish Catholic weekly. The journalist asks that the journalist states that he encounters the opinion that the Istanbul Convention has actually no importance. What can we in general point out as the effects, as the negative effects of its implementation in those countries which have already implemented it. In part, I think we have already answered this question, but maybe you will have something to add.
I want to make just a general comment. I'm sure someone will answer much more in detail when where there is implementation of the convention. But I find it quite offensive to adopt a document which claims to be a legal document that will bind those member states, and it has no importance. Why do we need to busy ourselves with adopting and going through procedures of ratifying documents that have no meaning? So that's the general argument that I would say would completely nullify any questions along those lines. But I'm sure that there are specific consequences. For example, the gender police gravio that is supposed to be introduced internationally to all nations who are under the convention to actually inform and restrict rights on those who oppose this kind of ideology. Maybe some of those countries where it's been implemented can comment on that.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from those countries which have already ratified the convention willing to?
Yeah, if I can, I just add something to what's been said. I think that from the Italian perspective, there hasn't been much discussion on a public level about this, maybe except when the convention was actually signed back in 2012, but it was a discussion that was confined more to the parliament. I think in Italy we've seen a sort of ambiguous application of the convention. So on one side we've had sort of provisions that go in the sense of prevention of actual violence and some modifications in the criminal law, for example, which could be discussed but are not generally sort of 100% ideological. On the other side, I think especially on educational matters, the convention stresses, also talks about the importance of sort of, deconstructing these gender stereotypes. I think in Italy we've seen the worst consequences on that level. So educational level, gender perspectives, we don't really know what these negative stereotypes amount to in this perspective. I mean, it can be anything from real negative stereotypes, like a woman has only value because she is sexy, to stereotypes that are such only on an ideological basis. For example, marriage between a woman and a man is sometimes considered to be stereotypical, or a woman bringing up her children and working at home, for example. So, yeah, I mean, this is the Italian experience, at least.
Thank you so much for this account. There's one more question of importance coming from the online TV that broadcasted our today's conference, asking whether there's a chance to de-ratify the convention in any of those countries which have already gone through the ratification process. Do you see any chance of de-ratification, to withdraw from the convention in the foreseeable future?
But I think there is a opportunity for that.
Not in Italy. I don't see it in the immediate future, at least.
Croatia? Have there been any statements of the politicians or public figures regarding the possible ratification?
Croatia is currently in the middle of the parliamentary elections campaign, political campaign, and we are hearing from some of the competing parties that they are willing to de-ratify Istanbul Convention. I think we have to understand that ratification of the convention is expression of the will of the political ruling parties. So as long as the ruling parties are in power, it is difficult to imagine that they will change their position, which has met already in many countries so strong opposition. So I think that it is very important that we continue explaining what is Grevio as the body, which would then monitors how the Istanbul Convention is applied, that finances of different groups in our countries would come and the decision would be made by Grevio. So there are many elements in this convention which are giving power to the politicians whenever they want to apply gender ideology in more intensive extent than maybe currently is being applied. But yes, I think that ratification is possible. We should aim to the de-ratification. We should follow the steps of Poland, I hope, in the future.
I hope so. And there's also just one more question, but I think it falls a little bit out of the scope of our today's event. It refers to the situation in Poland, and I think it would be up to answer this question individually in a let's say individual conversation with the journalist, because it deals with the detailed provisions of Polish law. So once more, thank you so much for your participation, for all those substantial accounts. This whole conference will be available online via YouTube as a record. And we once more encourage all. One more question, maybe.
Pytanie od Polonia Christiana. Czy państwo prelegenci obserwują przejawy lobbingu zagranicznego na rzecz konwencji pozainstytucjonalną ze strony Unii Europejskiej? Jakie podmioty lobbują?
So the question is from one of the biggest Polish portals, Polonia Christiana, Christian portals, and it is, can we observe any other attempts to lobby to ratification the Istanbul Convention, to promote the Istanbul Convention, besides those from the European Union?
And yes, who is lobbying?
Who is lobbying, yes.
Was pushing for the ratification from your point of view?
I mentioned in my presentation that there was a rapporteur from the not a reporter, a journalist, but a member of the United Nations bureaucracy, Mrs. Simonic. I think she's Croatian. She was visiting Bulgaria, and she also very clearly insisted that Bulgaria criticized Bulgaria for not ratifying the Istanbul Convention. So we see not only the European Union, but also you see United Nations bureaucrats and certain lobbies within those institutions. It's definitely, there is like an elite type of grouping that insists on redefining the traditional family, the gender, sex, marriage. They do want to impose something dystopian on the peoples. So definitely there is a cooperation within those lobbies in these high places of authority, not only in the European Union, but also other organizations. In this situation, that's clear because we have the European Commissioner doing the same thing and the United Nations representative doing exactly the same thing, condescendingly saying you must, putting pressure, you're not understanding what you have missed, go ahead and sign this convention. And of course, that also defies, as we mentioned, national sovereignty as well.
Thank you so much for your answer. Maybe I will add something to it. I think that the problem is that the international institutions are used they are used by radical ideological lobbies that are very well stated there. So this is a problem that is visible not only on the example of the Istanbul Convention, but many other ideological concepts like sexual and reproductive health and rights agenda, sexuality education, and so on and so on. And it is an example of a broader action that is undertaken by these movements. So I think our best solution to counter these movements is also to engage ourselves in these institutions and speak loudly about things that we are opposing to. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you. I would like to thank you also to all the audience that were watching our online stream, to journalists that were present here and through online on this conference. Thank you again for attending our event.
Thank you so much. Once more.